labyrinth to control all and everything, unable to forget the scarlet letter.
Greetings, good evening. Hey, good to see you. This is something that, for some reason, I've never shared it with you. I've really never shared it with anyone. And that goes for like all of my writing, and I don't know why that is, but I'm ready to share it with you now. I guess timing is everything, isn't it? Apparently so. I'm going to read my submission from the Lucifuge Rofocale, the Lord of Pacts compendium from Become a Living God. It's book number 5. You can't get these anymore. These are the hardback grimoires. They sell out very quickly. You can find this, I think, in a softback format, maybe in Amazon. I'm not sure. But if anyone's lucky to have any of these right here, definitely keep them close to you. They're certainly very valuable in a monetary sense and with the information that they contain. I think this is going to be pretty eye-opening. This writing came from an 8-hour-long evocation with Lucifuge back in like 2016, I think, 2017. One of the longest ritual evocations that I had ever performed. And he was literally like sitting there with me, dictating to me everything. The name of the title of the writing is Libera Ipsum, which means free thyself. It's the same thing that I have tattooed here on my chest. It means a lot to me, and I'm very sorry that I never shared it with you. But I'll certainly do that now. Just had to find it. Here it is. Okay, wow, odd. It's book number 7 in this grimoire. So it's Libera Ipsum, Free Thyself, book 7, JD Temple. And I'll go ahead and begin. It has been nearly 3 years since my first encounter with one of the most mysterious and largely misunderstood demonic entities, Lucifuge Rofocale. There are many who claim that this particular demon can be extremely difficult to work with, and it is not typically recommended that less experienced practitioners attempt to summon him. Because of this, Lucifuge has found himself on many magicians' do not summon list. For many, the fear of what could be supersedes the curiosity of what might have been. The multitude of magicians that allow the tongues of others to limit the progress of their own spiritual ascent is quite staggering. What a fine example of the herd mentality alive and well in our current day and age. Thankfully, I did not heed the warnings of those who openly expressed their unfounded opinions regarding this powerful being of darkness. Had I done so, I can say with all certainty that this essay would have never come into existence, nor would the man that I now know myself to be. While it is true that I have indeed worked very closely with many demons, there is something uniquely different about Lucifuge. I had great difficulty in my initial attempts to discern exactly what it was about this demon that seemed to put him in a class all his own. Although I felt great excitement in regards to this mystical nature, I could not ignore the indefinable energy surrounding him. This caused my mind to wander with reckless abandon in an effort to process what I considered to quite possibly be nothing more than my own insanity. While most demons that I have worked with understand the overall human condition, they do not necessarily have empathy for the overwhelming intensity that life impresses upon those that dwell here physically upon this earth. For the longest time, I could not fully comprehend why this demon, this so-called vile spawn of hell, would be compassionate enough to willingly bring him down to my level. One of the more astounding aspects of his comforting gesture was that he would always do so unsolicited and without any reservations. Lucifuge knew that if he was willing to not only display, but sincerely embody vulnerability, that I myself would in turn do so. If he was able to allow me to fully know and understand him, that I could then begin to truly know and understand myself. As time passed, I found this demon to be so relatable, compassionate, and understanding. I had finally come to realize that these highly favorable and immensely desirable attributes are the key to unlocking Lucifuge Rofocale's mysteries. I must admit that I'm somewhat apprehensive to candidly express the gnosis that I have come to possess regarding this powerful infernal host. Though I may be hesitant, and maybe even somewhat afraid, I fully understand that I must be willing, as was Lucifuge, to share of myself in this way. In doing so, not only will those who read of this text come to better know and understand him, but in turn they shall then come to better know and understand themselves. Yeah. A more thorough comprehension is found within that which duplicates the natural cycles of life, that those whom reside upon this earth are subject to. It is for this reason that I shall now take a step back into darkness, of which Lucifuge and I first became acquainted. I can make only one promise to those who are willing to now embark upon this journey through the reading of this text, that indeed the mysteries of Lucifuge Rofocale shall at its conclusion be dutifully revealed. Though the gnosis that I have come to understand as his mysteries may be considered to be somewhat incomplete, I shall stand steadfast in the truthfulness of my testimony therein. I am confident that Lucifuge has much more in which he wishes to express, and even greater mysteries yet to be revealed, not only unto myself, but unto all who boldly seek him. For those who know me well, it is no secret that I am an extremely spontaneous person. While I do strive to remain in a constant state of balance in all areas of my life, I will have to admit that I rely on my intuition almost exclusively, as I have found that my internal sense of just knowing is an instant as a delicious carnation breakfast drink. Of course, this has not always been the case, and for much of my adult life I struggled to understand why I seem to operate on an entirely different wavelength from the majority of those around me. While our society would have me believe that I am but one of thousands of useless stones wasting away within the grave of a dry creek bed, it was Lucifuge who prompted me to instead transform the contents of that gravestone into foundational bedrock. Lucifuge made it very clear that the entirety of this world as I knew it could indeed become that of which I so desired it to be. But before any of that could take place, there was a war to be waged within myself. This war would not be fought on a foreign land, nor would I be taking up arms against an unknown invader. This war, he explained carefully, would take place within the confines of my own mind, And if I were to be victorious, that person who I once knew myself to be must perish, and the thumbprint of the influence purged from within me entirely. This new way of not only viewing the world around me, but the manner in which I govern my very existence within it shall forever be changed. The person with whom I had for so long identified myself to be was now be considered public enemy number one, and this tyrannical oppressor was to be given no quarter, shown no mercy. It was painfully obvious that I would indeed have to die. Killing off this detrimental part of me would be necessary to move forward, by embracing a new way of living through the ancient art of dying. This new way that I was to embrace to its fullest extent possible would be entered on this new version of myself. Lucifuge stressed the importance of the cultivation and utilization of my psychic senses, and that much time, attention, and emphasis must be placed upon the development and application of these attributes that would eventually be fully accessible unto me. Lucifuge stressed the point of not getting caught within the cobwebs of my own conscious mind, as it is within those dangerous recesses of ourselves that we can so easily fall victim once again to our former states of mental slavery. Lucifuge played an integral role in my life in assisting me to come into the realization that the only way in which to completely live my true will and in the fullness of my potential was to embrace and put into use those parts of myself that the outside world had convinced me were the main source of struggle and pain in my life. Honing in my psychic nature and learning to become one with all things around me would prove to be a vital part of my newly found rebirth here upon this earth. Although I have always considered myself to be a successful person, I couldn't help but feel as if I were failing to fire on all cylinders, so to speak. When I had finally felt that I could begin to implement the advice bestowed upon me by the demonic brother of darkness, it was then that I realized that I was indeed becoming one with the dark matter in which I had been created. It would be through his careful guidance that I would learn how to embrace and make practical use of that which I only then knew to be a product of my own scrambled insanity. Just as Lucifuge had assured me, by the heeding of his words and the execution of our plans into action, that things would finally begin to fall into place. I began to see the world and myself in vastly different ways, and many might say, in a different light. However, this version of the world that I was being shown and now beginning to make sense of was actually one devoid of all light. It was a world filled with the darkest of all casted shadows. Within this newly found realm of eternal night, I embraced the realization that I had to become like Lucifuge, he who flees the light. Through him, I knew that I was coming into full communion with my own internal darkness. It was obvious to me that I was different, as Lucifuge had stressed to me that my operating system was not what most in our current society would consider to be typical. I have a keen understanding now of why so many upon this earth struggle as they do, as they are much like me, they are much like him. For those of us that are cut of the infernal cloth, we must realize and embrace who and what we are if we are ever to expect to make it through this life alive. If we fail to accept our true identity each and every day, our lives will be comparable to the struggle and frustration that is a direct result of attempting to force a square peg into a circular hole. It just doesn't work, no matter how hard one may try to make it so through physical means alone. It is of no surprise to me that society would then be so quick to label those like me as inflicted with mental illness, usually via their own internet-based methods of self-diagnosis. In today's world of instant access to information, we find that every keyboard warrior is also a self-proclaimed physician, but it typically does not end there, as most adopt the additional roles of judge, jury, and executioner as well. Rather than accepting a life shrouded by the stigma placed upon me by a confused and unjust society, I instead chose to embrace my supposed infliction and learn how to utilize it to my own benefit, just as Lucifuge had advised. Through persistent dedication and focusing my awareness as it relates to the development of my own psychic faculties, I have come to realize that they are indeed similar to that of a muscle found within our physical body. As the more they are utilized, the stronger they become. On the adverse side of that notion, if not put into consistent use, the overall capacity of these inherent faculties decreases, and if neglected entirely, may even seem to go dormant within us. I strongly stand behind the notion that if one desires to increase their psychic skill set or gifts, that one must wholeheartedly trust in the validity of the information in which they have physically received. Lucifuge impressed upon me what I feel is an important antidote in regard to the development of one's psychic abilities, that being, you must be willing to be wrong and to be wrong strong. As this seemingly unimportant phrase became something of a constant companion in my life, much like Lucifuge himself, I found myself constantly returning back to seek the wisdom that was found within them both. Lucifuge explained that if one is overly concerned with how they may appear to others, that might ridicule them based on their psychic inaccuracy, they shall never come to realize the influx of personal power that is there to be attained via the validation of their psychic insight. When in consultation with my own clients, I have always promoted the sentiment, whatever comes through, just put it out there, as this is the only way in which one can ever hope to truly grow in this area. It is of my humble opinion that it is indeed our sixth sense that is our most important in this life. Once I had better developed my psychic senses to the degree of being able to more easily feel the things that Lucifuge was communicating to me, the floodgates of information began to fully open. It was then that he began to reveal things to me so that I might be better able to make sense of his mysterious nature. There are some who may disagree with my interpretations that shall be laid out in the paragraphs that follow, and of course I respect each person's right to their own opinions. There was a distinct reason why Lucifuge came across so differently to me than did the other demonic entities in which I had so closely worked with. I knew that his energetic signature was a bit foreign, yet it was indeed so oddly familiar. Lucifuge Rofocale is not exactly like other demons, and he is not entirely a product of the infernal realm. Lucifuge is a demigod, in that there is a part of him that is indeed very human, combined with the dark wisdom of the demonic. There are clues that can be found within the details of his physical manifestational appearance, in that he is depicted as having the upper body image of a man, with the lower portion of his form being that of a goat. It is through the results of dark alchemical transformation that Lucifuge Rofocale has emerged as the vital link between mankind and those that reside in the demonic realm. This is the reason that Lucifuge is the primary maker of demonic pacts, as it is he who possesses the vibrational resonance that brings forth into creation the frequency responsible for the solidification of these workings in the astral realm. The hoop or ring in which Lucifuge has been known to carry with him in one hand is representative of his key role as the vital link or nexus point that I had mentioned prior. Much like the links of a chain, he possesses the power and authority to join two opposite sides together in union, bringing them together as one. The hoop is also representative of the eternal force of creation and occult gnosis that is depicted within the image of the Ouroboros. I have found that when it comes to Lucifuge Rofocale, there is a multitude of important information about who he is and what he represents via the details of his physical appearance. The three horns that are prominently positioned upon his head are representative of his specific role as the intermediary between man and demon during the sacred rite of pact making. Each horn represents the three sovereign individuals that come together during this particular type of official ritual working. The horn positioned on the left side depicts the demon in which the pact is intended to be made. The horn on the right side represents the man or woman who wishes to initiate said pact working. And the center horn, that stands for Lucifuge himself, as he brings together the willing parties of man and demon, as within him the qualities and elements of both can be found. Lastly, there is a small sack that he carries in one hand opposite the one that clutches the aforementioned hoop. Many have understood this sack to contain gold coins or some type of treasure. I have come to understand that this metaphor can be representative of many things, but more so than anything else, the contents found therein are similar to a type of magical seed. The contents of the sack are implements utilized in a specific alchemical transmutation resulting from Lucifuge's powerful, potent magical workings. Just as a seed grows here upon this earth when safely planted within fertile soil, so would this seed of magical power and psychic awareness continuously prosper within a deserving vessel fully invested in their ascent. Magicians interested in working with Lucifuge should certainly do so, as if you have the desire, then you already possess one of the most important qualities that he finds attractive. I have found that when approaching Lucifuge, the most important belief, or the most important character trait to outwardly display with great enthusiasm is one's confidence and belief in their own inherent godhood. This is keenly displayed through one's desire, not allowing themselves to be influenced by those who would attempt to dissuade them from their goals by creating falsehoods. Those that understand what is good for the gander may not necessarily be good for the goose embrace this independent and free-thinking ideal in which Lucifuge so boldly champions. Lucifuge seems to understand the power and value of the mind better than any other spirit that I have ever worked with. He would frequently expound upon a multitude of ever-present dangers that existed within our reality. The grand conspiracy that is the struggle for control of the minds, which rightfully belong to the individuals in which physically house, support, and nourish them. The following text is a dictation that I had obtained during an evocation of Lucifuge, whereas he had much to say regarding the topics previously mentioned within this paragraph. There are forces that have so keenly, and might I add covertly, controlled every aspect of the human mind. These agendas, when broken down to their most basic forms, can be summed up but in a few key terms. These are limitation, control, and constraint, via manipulation of humanity's most valuable personal asset, that being the mind. For thousands of years, this plague upon the human race has been carried out mainly through the means and tactics employed by the various mainstream organized religions, many of which remain prevalent in this current day and age. It is because of this that those rebellious souls, those cut of a darker cloth, have continued their pursuit to overcome the tyranny that has remained at the forefront of society for countless generations. Unjust factions of elitists continue to force upon society their fabricated versions of human history, that of which they covertly utilize to shape the future of the world. Without the slightest hesitation, these emotionless puppets, these pawns of the master, smugly continue to construct the new aeon of the modern age with nothing more than manufactured illusion. Boasting a blueprint of supposed perfection, this manufactured master, this self-proclaimed grand architect of all existence, is nothing more than a character of the likes that can be found within the text of one's favorite children's book. What this master constructs is nothing more than a false bill of goods, a supposed empire of which lacks any form of actual substance. Its bedrock nothing more than their foundation of lies. It is certainly the intent to forever hide the truth, hoard the ultimate power found in the human potential, and above all do everything else to prevent the common man from fostering that primordial urge to truly know thyself. Those that have truly awakened, the steadfast witches and sorcerers of this world that work within the protective confines of the shadows, are those that initiate that opposing force and push back against those scoundrels that attempt to assert their control upon the masses. These spiritual free agents regain that which has been stripped away from them by the way of their own magical practices. Occultists refuse to bow before any god, nor will they stand for any notion or idea that is in direct opposition to an individual's personal freedom. Their methods of combating the tyranny include traversing the spiritual realms, seeking out obscure grimoires to unlock their mysteries, and by conjuring forth powerful demons into physical form before them to regain that which was been lost for centuries. While much ground has been regained and sources of unlimited power and potential have begun to once again be tapped into, there still remains a substantial blockage or limiting force that continues to hold humanity's intended evolution back. Black magicians should indeed all seek power, and in doing so, seek only that power that is of the limitless variety. If one has spent any time actively involved in the implementation of magical practices, then it should be well understood that the nature of the power obtained through black magic is indeed that, limitless. Now, having that understanding of the sheer magnitude of power that can be wielded magically, it becomes the responsibility of the magician to remove any obstacles that could possibly stand between them and that coveted philosopher's stone. That epitome of the shattering of all understanding regarding the limitations of mortal man. Pardon me for a moment. Gotta take care of yourself sometimes, you know what I mean? We will continue when I'm ready. So just a moment, please. Here we go. With every ritual working, spell casting, and spirit evocation, the magician is the very embodiment of creation itself. In fact, they are, in that very moment, like that of a god. Within every fiber of both man's physical and spiritual body, it is so. That humankind is comprised of a collective current that resonates within the very darkest of all matter. The evolution of mankind, spawned largely by their inherent desire to surpass that which was once perceived to be unattainable or altogether impossible, continues onward in its transformational process of becoming. The journey, the great ordeal that man has come to know simply as life, is indeed the great equalizer, as all men here on earth live, but not all men that tread upon its solid ground must die. The haves and the have-nots are differentiated by much more than the gold and other riches that can be obtained in one's life here on this earth. The aspects of humanity that become the determining factors of life beyond the perception of this reality are vital for one to exist outside of this world's limitations. These things and these things alone should be the primary focus of all mankind. For many, amassing a great fortune becomes the primary objective of this physical life. This sentiment can be viewed as rather short-sighted, as it does nothing to nourish the eternal soul which resides within all living beings. As whether they live on or they perish, the tangible wealth acquired can't be taken with them when their time here has ended. The wise seek that which shall be carried with them, and that which has been obtained spiritually through the means of their magic. These things, combined with the overall life experience, will most certainly benefit them when the time comes for them to release from the physical body in which they are now currently seated, and then freely move on to higher dimensional realms in which they then seek to exist within. The keys to mortal man's own godhood lay hidden within the many layers of the energetic body and the immortal spirit. It is here that sources of man's ultimate drive and inspiration can be found, that inferno that roars within those that have awakened, that which man has come to know as the inner black flame. That nurturing of the black flame of knowledge can propel one to accomplish their dreams, live out their true will, and obtain spiritual knowledge that would otherwise be unattainable to the typical human. There are many that remain ignorant in their living slumber, wasting so much more than this one life. Their inaction will also jeopardize future spiritual existence. For those in which the flame is not ignited, death shall surely come to reap what remains of life. Before one can fully ignite this flame and benefit from the unlimited bounty found therein, one must access that part of themselves that is not only hidden, but that part of them that operates independently of conscious thought entirely. This is not the mind's co-pilot, rather this is the mind's autopilot. While this seemingly sentient part of man is responsible for most of the regulatory body functions, such as breathing and swallowing, etc., it is also the main hub that houses the most vital aspects of man and who they are as an opinionated, independent thinking person. This is the place where man's overall worldview takes shape and their unique persona is molded into the I am. This part of man is responsible for not only the way that they perceive themselves, but also the very world around them. It can then be said that this is all-important part of the human being is fully capable of either lifting them to the loftiest of heights, or it could greatly limit or even destroy them entirely. Therefore, it is entirely true that man is both their own best friend and their own worst enemy. Within the main hubs of man's complex mind, there lay an intricate maze of corridors. These lost and in many cases forgotten pathways lead to the hidden dungeons where there can be found both mental and emotional information of vital importance. For most, this information is inaccessible to the conscious mind, where it could be easily recognized and thus altered to suit man's own immediate needs. But rather, it remains trapped and shackled within the dark confines of the subconscious. It is here, within man's own personal abyss of dense brain matter, that these holding cells can be found. Here, one can discover not only the darkest aspects of themselves, but also some of the most profound and magical, valuable aspects of who they are as an individual. It is here, within this intricate labyrinth, that both the lock and the key reside, that precious implement that so many never even fully know exist, and which either can be unequivocally defined who they are or perpetually dominate and control them. This is the place where one can either spawn greatness or bury themselves in their own defeat unknowingly. This is the birthplace of creation, wherein the most spectacular and utterly amazing of all magic begins, but adversely it can also operate as that all too familiar birth mother of the commonplace mediocrity. There is but a small defining point, a subtle mark, if you will, that mankind all must hit in just the right way, that allows them to either break the chains and thus break free of that which lay trapped within, or find themselves fully bound and blinded within the bowels of their own inner mental malaise. Far off in the distance, past the place within the mortal mind, whereas nocturnal dreamscapes challenge man's waking perception of reality, there can be found clusters of rather obscure chambers. These isolated areas are connected to the neurological pathways in which psychics thought and spiritual communication ebb and flow, much like the viscous warm crimson carried within the veins of man's physical body. This communication and associated information flow freely from within the energy centers. For all mankind, empowerment can be found through the realization and the ultimate understanding of what must transpire to embrace the living God within them. Man must seek to both master and then utilize the immense potential that is only found within their inherent psychic faculties. Once the appropriate level of spiritual ascent is achieved through apotheosis, all is then made apparent, and the intended destination that is found both within and beyond these earthly confines of limitation are then clearly realized. Life is no more complex than is the flavor found within the nectar of the gods. Man must be willing to allow, without any cause for concern, fully embracing their mind's reality, and to understand and accept that there may not always be a right or a wrong answer. There are indeed cosmic shifts that create an overlapping effect within the confines of one's own perception. Man can't fathom the true complexity of that which he only knows to be in and of himself, for he exists not only within, but also without. Man's most powerful weapon is that he resides within the subconscious mind, that all-powerful epicenter of magical prowess and potency, the powerhouse generator of the mind that naturally links up to the astral plane and is primarily responsible for the fantastical manifestations in which few men have learned to command into existence here on this physical plane. These separate compartments of consciousness also created areas that attempt to bury the guilt, fear, and shame that mankind had been literally programmed to absorb. Much like a parasite, these infiltrated and hijacked areas within the man's subconscious mind are fed, and through the lies and manipulation imposed upon them, confusion and denial are not only created, but nurtured. Unbeknownst to the majority of both men and women currently existing upon the earth, they integrate concepts that eventually shall begin to slowly consume and destroy them from within. Without realizing what they are actually doing, they carry out agendas that are at the end game, at the end game, products so carefully created by design and specifically geared toward their own demise. And like the good little sheep that they have been groomed to become, they will then pass down these programs of disease, limitation, and absolute death to their future generations. Mankind, a once immensely powerful psychic being, and of the likes that borderline that of a demigod themselves, are now only fragments of their intended and former glory. It is so very painful to see how they have been conditioned to believe that they should be proud of who they are, submissively taking their position within the flock. The master, he of the false light, has conditioned mankind to feel a hollow and insincere sense of peace and comfort by his staff, and he is the shepherd. After all, it is he who claims to feed them. It is he who clothes them. It is he who demands their supplication, and as they cling to him, they have been conditioned to believe that they find solace within the shelter of his cloak, and it is so graciously laid down upon them. The cloak that his programmed paradigm hides behind, and the very same that would have mankind to believe that humble obedience is the way to everlasting life. It continues to falsely project itself to be the one most glittering golden grandeur. It all but forces one to believe that those whom are meek and powerless, as is the Lamb, are in fact the very embodiment of the righteous man. In reality, this cloak is nothing more than brick-filled sackcloth, the magnitude of the tremendous weight that is carried or that continuously bears down upon the indoctrinated is utterly devastating. Those that have never been considered the possibility of such power being fully attainable are the very same that will never come to know it. The real problem therein lies with the majority of those seeking to ascend, that they think they truly believe that they can assert such power within their lives, but on a subconscious level, their childhood conditioning has them shackled within the constraints of limitation. There are many that fall for this without any notion of a second guess, but for those that have awakened, it is plainly understood that this is no cloak of peace or protection. This is the all-consuming cloak of guilt, fear, and shame. This is the hunter's net that ensnares his prey, preventing them from then moving forward in freedom. This is the unassuming trap of he who will actually wears the mask of the impostor, he who imposes upon the masses the self-limiting shackles of both social and religious dogma alike, and preaches that each should don the same cloak as he. It is he who urges man to adapt that righteous attitude of subservient, humble dignity, and to follow him in blind faith, taking up the burdens of his yoke upon themselves. It is within the deep cover of man's own camouflage that he finds the viciousness of his own predatory roots that, once given life, then entangle and distort every aspect of who he believes himself to be. Mankind has been the victim of subconscious programming imposed upon each one of them in the most formidable years of their delicate, and might I add, impressionable lives. For nearly 99% of humans, it is their paradigm that is largely responsible for not only their overall worldview, but it has in most cases been the core influence of their entire belief system. For at least the last 2,000 years, this built-by-design means of controlling the masses has been injected into the fabric of society by those seeking to conceal the powers of knowledge that are stepping stones to the acquisition of even greater levels of human discovery. There is one aspect of this programming that is the most destructive, as it is the sum total of every disgusting mental manipulation ever imposed upon mankind, and that, dear ones, would be the extinction of man's genuine ability to truly love themselves. The love of self, as can be seen in today's world, may appear to be alive and well. However, much of this sentiment is a false projection of reality, and typically goes no deeper than the surface. For one to truly love themselves, one must therefore trust in themselves with all of their heart and soul, and that has to be torn from man and skillfully redirected. For the whole of mankind, every man, woman, and child have been conditioned to feel ashamed for loving themselves, and that mankind should devote every ounce of love to this God that they have been conditioned to fear. When man willingly entertains notions of them embracing their unique individual identities and truly begins to fall in love with that of which they are, it is then that hidden weapons of the enemy has implanted within their mind quickly begins to initiate the full force of its devastating destruction. These weapons were created to inflict the most severe and self-destructive, self-sabotaging thought patterns that are a direct result of the indoctrination and total takeover of man's subconscious. The more attempts to realize their true identity and in turn nurture the inner black flame seated deeply within them, they find the heavier their cloak of absolute bondage becomes. Bricks continue to be added to this sackcloth of constraint, of which those that remain asleep must endure for the entirety of this mortal life. Stand upright with the absolute confidence and be not afraid. Without any hint of hesitation, one should boldly proclaim their rightful position here upon this earth. Be also insistent to your will to proclaim your rightful position within those lofty realms that exist above the earth. Stand firm and with absolute defiance, laying claim to those endless caverns of darkness and molten rivers that empty out into nothingness, as this shall solidify your position of ultimate power, unencumbered within this physical world. Be still and just for a moment quiet yourself, so that you might hear that still small voice that is all too familiar within each living soul. Listen carefully and be ever so patient as this silent whisper that you have longed to hear, as it beckons ever so sweetly for you to simply wake up. This voice prompts you to earnestly follow your heart, your instincts, and all the powerful psychic nature through your intuition. For once an individual begins to do these things, something truly magnificent begins to manifest. Within each and every human being there lay a forgotten seed, that which was then made subject to the most transformative magical alchemy. The end result being that of which immaculately sown spark brimming with demonic power. Appearing to be as if it were but a minuscule fragment derived from a mere grain of sand, this magnitude of its power and glory could topple nations. There, seated deeply within the souls of man, this spark begins to ignite. The purpose of this spark-bearing seed is for man to become in alignment with the God form or the higher self. This connection is yet another key aspect or primary driving force behind the magician's conquest of obtaining limitless human potential. Once a true connection is established, it is then that one can truly begin to live. The true us is the spirit, and it is the spirit that is aiding our physical body or avatar through the conscious direction of the higher self, which comfortably resides in another part of the universe, perhaps, or even maybe another dimension entirely. The higher self works alongside the avatar in an effort to complete a successful incarnation and gather valuable life experience while here on this physical plane of existence. Humankind has been programmed to believe that the key to everlasting life is through something external of them, when the entire time that very thing in which they have so desperately been in search of for countless generations was indeed inside of each of them since the very beginning of time. Never has there been such a disgusting act opposed upon another that could even begin to rival the magnitude of that in which I now regretfully elaborate. I gotta pee. I gotta pee. Ugh. I'm gonna go do that. Be it so that it is not only the solemn duty of each magician to seek and destroy these implanted parasites of limitation that hide deep within their own minds, but to then also scatter these newly attained keys of truth, much like seeds unto the wind, so that each and every human being can then realize the freedom found in self-liberation that is there for all to embrace. It is then that the truth can be fully realized, and man's individual power to then flourish. No longer slaves unto themselves, a mere product of the falsehoods derived by the forked tongue of the imprisoned man, that they can then finally to be set free. Shackled no more, so be it that the fruits of this good news can then be harvested by the collective, and the constraints of limitation abolished now and forever. It is only through man's own awareness and deliberate actions that freedom from the tyrannical programming and conditioning can then be eradicated from within them, thus no longer plaguing humanity with its pestilence. The self-limiting nature of this conditioning goes directly against every intention or execution of action by the inspiring magician. It is the true will, or the true poison. It is the true poison within the tainted waters of the well. The silent killer that continues to stalk his prey undetected, as if his very existence is only a product of one's own mind, and what threat could be legitimate without an opposing force executing the delivery therein. It was then that Lucifuge grew silent, and he departed without even being dismissed. As I sat there in quiet meditation, my eyes strained as I scanned the pages of the information that I had almost unknowingly scribbled down. Although I had a burning desire to read each and every word at that moment, I realized that I would only be spinning my wheels. Utterly exhausted, I could not shake the unmistakable feeling of the trance-like state that still had its hold on me. I tried my best to stay alert and conscious. However, I soon realized that I would be unable to process Lucifuge's words given my current state of exhaustion. Slowly but surely, I then drifted off to sleep. The following day, I reflected back on the events that had transpired. I was stunned at the duration of the prior day's evocation, as it was almost 7 hours that Lucifuge was there with me. Looking back upon it, I realized that it did contain quite a dreamlike quality, more so than any other ritual evocation or similar magical ritual has to this date, within the confines of my memory. I read over page after page of dictations taken down straight from the lips of that demon, that demigod, who I had spent so much time with the day before. It was then that I noticed the words inscribed on the back of one of the pages that read, Libera te Ipsum. I did not recall writing these words during the ritual, and was unsure as to the meaning of its phrase that lay before me. With great haste, I threw open my laptop and quickly went to the internet in search of the answers. I found the origin to be Latin, and then found that indeed these words, this phrase, did have a sensible meaning after all. I found that Libera te Ipsum, translated into English language, meant free thyself. I knew then that Lucifuge had to have written that somehow during the ritual, and even though it was hiding on the back of one of the numerous pages within the notebook, he would ensure that I would be led to the proper place in order to find it. I reflected upon the phrase as I looked back over the multitude of information contained within the thick stack of pages. I read over the evocation notes, allowing my mind to absorb the text that stared back at me, betwixt the lines that seemed to struggle to contain them. Feeling stressed, I then sat back, rubbing my eyes, and then once again jumped right back into it. This time I decided to transcribe the text, transferring each word of the text neatly onto the pages of another notebook. I wanted to be sure that my eyes would not inadvertently miss something, as I knew there was certainly a chance that I could overlook a piece of information if I did not do so. As I transferred sentence after sentence of information, I could feel the energy of the room around me shift. I could feel that all too familiar twinge within my abdomen, and that rush, almost like a sensation of butterflies that one can experience within the presence of someone that they are a bit nervous around. Having grown accustomed to this particular vibration, I knew then that it was my dear friend Lucifuge, and that he had returned to check in on me following the lengthy ordeal of the prior day's ritual evocation. Once I knew for sure that it was indeed him, I then felt a wave of reassurance wash over me. Lucifuge wanted to ensure that I would not be alarmed at his presence, and in appreciation of this, I in turn provided a subtle gesture to return the favor. I smiled and chuckled a bit under my breath, and then spoke aloud to him. I thank him for being so upfront and for so graciously sharing of himself in the manner in which he had done so, not just the day prior, but for each instance in which he made his presence known unto me. I was glad that he had returned, and he had departed during the ritual evocation before I had the opportunity to thank him in the proper way. On that day before Lucifuge once again departed, I inquired as to the phrase in which he had mysteriously left for me on the back of the pages of my ritual notebook. Libera te Ipsum. Immediately, a familiar pop song from my youth began to play in my mind. I couldn't help myself as I bursted out into laughter, as I found his reference to be both comical and well-suited, as defined his message quite perfectly in my opinion. As I hummed along to En Vogue's hit tune, Free Your Mind, I found that it all made perfect sense to me. Sharing that moment was the perfect ending to the day, and his message had then become crystal clear to me. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. And that is it. That is all. Just remember that Lucifuge is a demigod. He is Hermes Trismegistus. He is Thoth, or he is connected to Thoth. And since you are a powerful magical being, someone that possesses so much psychic power, someone that is working some of the most amazing and powerful magic, that true alchemy, you're going to be following in his footsteps. I really urge you to sit with him, to commune with him, to channel your own unique sigil, as have I, for it will be used in the future. When all of this is gone, when all of the information that has been stored in our digital realm has had the plug pulled on it, the ancient knowledge, these occult mysteries, will be lost for the ages. Book burnings, the killing of witches and sorcerers, there will come a day. There will come a day. And just remember who and what you are, and then in the future, you will be that shining light for humanity. As they will gaze into your sigil, they will remember your name. They will be calling you forth as you shall rise up in this world once again to reveal that knowledge that soon will be lost and forgotten. Just like we owe so much to our ancestors that came before us, that worked with many of these energies and these entities and deities, that blood that flows through you is also in the same way so vital for all of those that are connected to us that shall come here to this earth after. Continue your evolution. And in the same way, when they conjure you and they would call you forth in the future, you will be assisting them in their continued evolution. You will be a savior of humanity. You will be much like Azazel and Shemyaza, the Watchers, that bestowed the blessings, the gnosis, and the information upon mankind in the past. You have a very vital role in that way. And I know that's a lot for you to wrap your head around, but it's true. There is a reason why you are what you are. And there's a reason that most people are not like you. For you have a greater purpose here. You do. It's true. You are a demigod. You are more than just a man. You are more than just a woman. You are spectacular in every way. Don't forget that. Never forget that. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. I hope you're doing well. Hope everything is going great for you. I do. I do. I just want to say one more thing. Hail to you. And I'm so very proud. So proud.
Calculate what we will not tolerate. Desperate to control all and everything, unable to forgive the scarlet letter.